Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another one of ResPublica's webinars for the Lifelong Education Commission. It's a great pleasure to welcome all of you and to welcome the Secretary of State and the Minister for Skills for our event. I think it's not recognised enough how vital skills are and education is, and how lifelong learning connects those two in the post-Brexit, post-COVID world. Britain has had an enormous productivity gap almost since the financial crisis, and skills are fundamental to bridging that gap. Some academics think, for example, that if we just improve management training, that we will halve the productivity gap presently existing with the United States. And it's the hope of ResPublica's commission, that's chaired by Skidmore MP, that we can create a system where everybody in the country over the age of 18 has the opportunity to reskill and relearn, whether they've been unsuccessful in the past and perhaps have been burnt by their experience for education. We want to offer them a second chance at levels 2, 3, and 4. Why not? They're far from the labour market, or they're at levels which don't give them the wages they need to prosper. We want to help those people, just as we do those who've been very successful and are currently prevented by regulations from retraining and taking another degree in the area that is most suitable for their career. We're also very concerned about cohorts of people, predominantly women, returning from childcare, who for far too many go back to jobs that are lower paid, non-career path, and have lost touch with the leading edge of their careers and their progression from when they left. We want to create a system that can speak to all of the different and differential needs of our citizens, that can essentially direct them to the level of training that is most appropriate for them, and give them the skills that they need to succeed and to help grow their towns, their cities, their regions, and ultimately the country. And if you read the speech that Chris made to launch the commission, you get a sense of what we're aiming for, to essentially lessen, if not remove, the barriers between FE and HE, not compromise the high-level research intensive work that's going on, but allow others to share in the goods and the benefits that accrue from that, so that we distribute skills and we distribute innovation widely amongst our population and amongst our businesses. And the other great key, of course, in the productivity gap is the problem of diffusion of innovation. And again, skills are the answer for this. So we at ResPublica believe that if we open the cupboard called levelling up, we think skills are fundamental and perhaps arguably the most fundamental approach to levelling up the country. So without further ado, let me turn to the chair of ResPublica's Lifelong Education Commission, the Right Honourable Skidmore MP, to introduce the Secretary of State. Chris, over to you.
Thank you, Philip, and thank you for all those who've tuned in to watch this speech from the Secretary of State today. I decided to set up the Lifelong Education Commission because I recognise that post-18 education is clearly a priority for the Prime Minister Boris Johnson and the government. But what I felt we needed was a vehicle, an institution that was solely going to focus on post-18 lifelong education as part of its work. We have the Higher Education Commission that exists, which I'm co-chairing an inquiry at the moment onto levelling up R&D funding. So I wanted to look at establishing a commission that would take some of the challenges that Philip's presented, and the commission will be running for at least another year and a half. I'm proud that we now have, I think, 14 commissioners signed up as part of the commission, and Philip will talk about the process of joining the commission for anyone watching who's interested. But it's my pleasure to introduce the Secretary of State for Education today. I worked with the Secretary of State while Minister of State for Universities, Science, Research and Innovation. I saw for myself time and time again his personal passion for ensuring that those individuals who may have missed out on opportunities while at school are given the chance to access education in order to be able to reskill, to be able to obtain the opportunities that were denied them earlier on in their careers. And so it's a real honour that the Right Honourable Gavin Williamson is able to speak to the Commission today to set out his vision for a post-18 education system. We've seen in the Queen's speech a real commitment to delivering on a skills-based reform with the Skills Bill and the publication of the lifelong learning entitlement. And so it's great to introduce Gavin Williamson to be able to speak on this topic today. Secretary of State, please take the floor.
Chris, thank you so much for those kind words. I know that as Universities Minister, you cared passionately about making sure all our young people got the right opportunities to get on in life, and how important it is for our further and higher education sectors to work together more closely. I'll be taking a real keen interest in your chairmanship of a new Lifelong Education Commission, which I know is going to be looking at these issues among many others. Ever since I joined the Department for Education, I've made it a personal mission of mine to get technical education the recognition and respect that it deserves, to make it very much the beating heart of local communities. Today, we are that much closer to achieving it, thanks to the Post-16 Education and Skills Bill. We've put skills right at the heart of our ambitious reforms to make sure our post-COVID recovery has a sure and solid foundation. For me, this bill is a signal that tells everyone we will empower you to get the skills that you need to build the life that you want. It's a massive investment in lifelong upskilling, an investment in communities so that people can thrive and prosper wherever they live. So today I'd like to talk in more detail about how the bill is going to do that and how it dovetails with the other reforms to the education landscape that we have already rolled out. I'm sure by now people are well aware that we are on a mission to level up the country so that better paid jobs are within reach of everybody, wherever they live. This is not just a question of basic justice, that people everywhere deserve the same chance to build a prosperous and fulfilling life for themselves. It's not just a question of rebuilding after the pandemic. It's a question of once and for all putting to rest the outdated and frankly ridiculous notion that the only measure of someone's worth is whether they have a degree. This has never made economic sense. Now, when skill shortages are so acute and the pandemic has thrown up deep challenges for many business sectors, it would be nothing short of a national calamity if we left it unaddressed. We are going to be tackling it head on and putting skills first in a radical programme of change to future-proof learning for generations to come. In too many areas of the country, people feel that the only way to get on is to get out. We see this repeated over and over, and it drains the lifeblood out of some of our great towns and cities. Perversely, shortages in key skills mean that employers in other sectors end up having to import workers because there just aren't enough skilled people. We want every community to offer opportunities to the people who live there, and we're putting employers in the driving seat. Employers will join forces with our great further education colleges to make sure that young people in the area can be confident that any course they take will lead to a job. We're introducing a duty for all further education providers and sixth form colleges to review how well the training they provide meets local needs and look at ways of improving it if necessary. Success will be built on partnerships between employers and further education colleges who will work together, hand in glove. It will enable colleges to respond to employers' skills needs and reshape what they offer students. It is a virtuous circle of supply and demand, but it's something that we have ignored for far too long, and we haven't delivered on it, but we are going to deliver it now. In this way, we will reset the balance so that young people not only have a high quality and viable alternative to going to university, but they know that it is one that will help them get a job. Last year, the Prime Minister launched the Lifetime Skills Guarantee, which will help people train and retrain at any point in their lives to learn new skills that will keep them working and progressing. As part of this, an estimated 11 million adults in England who do not yet have an A-level or equivalent qualification are now eligible to take up their first level 3 qualification for free from a list of almost 400 courses. The qualifications have been chosen because they're the most likely to boost career prospects, wages, and help fill skills gaps. They cover a range of subjects linked to sectors with good job opportunities, from engineering and agriculture to digital and health and social care. The Prime Minister has also announced plans to introduce a lifelong loan entitlement as part of a Lifetime Skills Guarantee. From 2025, it will provide individuals with a loan entitlement to the equivalent of 4 years of post-18 education to use over their lifetime. But at the core of this has to sit great further education and higher education partnerships and lifelong learning. I want a new era of partnerships between our great colleges and universities. The lifelong loan entitlement will have a huge impact on post-18 study, making it as simple to study in your local college as to get a loan to go to university, and making switching between the two easier than ever before. Our student finance system currently favours and pushes people towards a 3-year full-time degree at the expense of lifelong and higher technical learning. But most people need more flexibility in their lives to study, to train or to retrain and upskill, as both their circumstances and, of course, the economy changes. The lifelong loan entitlement will make it easier for students to choose how to study by creating a more streamlined funding system. People will be able to space out their studies and learn at a pace that is right for them, including opting to build up their qualifications over time within both colleges and universities. And it's that interaction between colleges and universities that I think is so important. We can only deliver this revolution in skills by making sure that our colleges and universities both play a great part in this. We will consult on the detail and the scope of the lifelong loan entitlement this year and continue to work closely with the sector so that it meets the needs of learners, employers, and our wider economy. From next year, we'll be running trials for certain short courses to see how this will work in practice. This will help us build up the lifelong learning entitlement. I've already spoken about colleges, but universities have this critical role to play if we are to level up across our nation. I want every university leader to feel reassured about this. But equally, we must recognise that some universities will need to adapt to truly embrace this opportunity. The way universities are today is going to have to change for the future in order for them to meet the needs of students of all ages, but also meet the needs of our economy and meet the needs of our nation. I want a wholesale reversal of a collapse in level 4 and 5 provision, which provides for technical needs in which our nation is truly lacking. Our new higher technical qualifications based on employer-led occupational standards represents the gold standard in this area. But not all provision at this level is focused on entry to a job, and we know that there are other qualifications in this space. Alongside this, we need a renewed emphasis on part-time provision, on modules, on creating routes between colleges and universities to enable people to study how, where, and when best suits them, whatever their age. I want to see universities reaching out to colleges as partners and as equals, as some already are doing, to create the learning ecosystem that we need for our nation. As it stands, we take one train down one track to one destination and do a 3-year degree. That has to change. The lifelong learning entitlement will be a train everyone can get on and off whenever they want, and we will lay a whole new network of tracks to connect people, communities, and fresh routes into jobs. All these reforms are a natural progression to what we have already been rolling out, such as our T-level and apprenticeship programs, for instance. These are also driven by employers, and we are already beginning to feel the benefit of a growing number of skilled workers who will boost our economy and bring down unemployment. Our institutes of technology will show our new partnerships in action. They are a wonderful and unique collaboration between further education colleges, universities, and employers to offer higher technical education and training at higher skills levels in key STEM sectors, such as digital, construction, advanced manufacturing and engineering, where employer demand is greatest. They're employer-led and reflect the needs of employers in the local areas they serve, drawing on the assets and expertise of local colleges and universities. They're helping to break down outdated distinctions between further and higher education. IoTs are designing and delivering a new learning offer, helping to meet demand for higher technical skills today, and creating a workforce that is ready for future technological change and the changing workplace practices. IoTs are already operating in areas such as Yorkshire, the West Midlands, North East, the South West and London. And the government is investing up to £290 million to set up a comprehensive network across all regions of England. This is how we are going to put an end to our productivity problem. For far too long, we have not had enough engineers, technicians, and construction workers. This has held back our economy, leaving us less competitive than many other countries around the world. It has also left people unable to realise their ambitions, but most tragically of all, unable to fill their true potential. At the same time, technology is transforming industries and businesses. You only have to look at the course of a pandemic to see how our lives can change in an instant. The skills you have now might not be the ones that you need in 10 years or even 5 years' time, possibly not even in 1 year's time. This is a moment of momentous change for education in this country. We have so often shied away from the changes that we need to deliver in post-16 education. But what we are going to do is deliver a revolution in the way that people will gain their skills throughout their lives. It is the key to unlocking our potential both economically and socially. Thanks to these reforms, people of all ages will know that they can go as far as their talent and ambition will take them, whatever unforeseen events occur. They will be able to make the most of opportunities as they arise, and they will be able to do it from wherever they live. We are not just building a new future for our children. This is also about building a new future for our country. Thank you.
Secretary of State, thank you so much for what's turned out to be a real keynote address in setting out the scale of both yours and the government's ambition with the skills bill, but also to demonstrate the breadth of vision that you have for the future of post-18 education. For those watching, the Secretary of State is just moving from the virtual podium to his virtual desk in order to be able to answer a few questions. His screen will then return, as it has just now. I want to say that the Secretary of State, unfortunately, will have to leave in a couple of minutes' time. I get the privilege as chair of asking the first few questions, but we have the double benefit of the Skills Minister, Gillian Keegan, being able to then pick up other questions that have been posed by the commissioners on the Lifelong Education Commission. So, Secretary of State, thank you so much for that passionate keynote address, which really set out reforms will bring those who access lifelong education. I was particularly struck by your message around partnership working between FE colleges and universities. I'd like to ask how we at the Lifelong Education Commission can best help yourself and the department in terms of what should our focus be on the core themes of work. The skills bill seems like a first milestone in transforming post-18 education. But what would you like personally to do next, and how can the Commission help you inform the direction in which you wish to go?
Well, Chris, thank you ever so much. I mean, there couldn't be a better person to lead this commission as yourself, because you kind of know the inner workings and gubbins of the education system probably pretty much better than everyone there, both the strengths and sometimes the weaknesses. I think the commission can play a really important role, because what we're embarking upon is not something that's easy. I wish it was going to be easy, but if we take the issue of modular learning, the ability to flow between further education and universities, but also between universities and other universities. This is a real challenge that we have, and it's probably one of key complexities that we've got to sort of sort and address. So anything that you can do, bringing the power of your thinking of the whole commission into this area, would be incredibly valuable in terms of having that strong, thoughtful voice of bringing people together to say this is how best we can make that work. I would be we have some ideas, but actually we really would value the input, the thinking, the advice and the guidance in this specific area.
Thank you. And in terms of the skills bill that has now been published and will make its way through Parliament, do you feel that there will be sort of opportunities to add to the legislation or subsequent regulations? And in terms of the timetable for the implementation of the bill, what extra work do you feel is needed to make the reforms sort of meaningful and impactful?
Well, Chris, you probably won't be surprised by this. As a former Chief Whip, I think the legislation is, of course, absolutely perfect. And I don't know how on earth anyone could think that you could ever possibly improve on it. Delivering the change in terms of post-16 education is something that will take a long time to do. And of course, just by legislating, it doesn't actually in itself make the change singularly just because you've got a law there. Actually, the biggest change that we have is got to be about changing culture, by changing approach about how we actually think about the interaction between colleges and universities, and actually the wider economy in terms of independent training providers and business. The very best of the college sector and the very best of the university sector always does this brilliantly well. And it's how you make sure that we raise the less good up to the level of the best. But it's also to really emphasize, this is about partnership. This is about partnership between those. It's not about one being more superior than the other. It's recognizing that actually, we're only going to deliver the type of sort of structural change and systemic change that we need by if this is a whole force effort of universities and colleges working in partnership as equals. And it's going to be a difficult message to get there, but I believe that we can.
Well, Secretary of State, thank you so much for attending the event today and for giving so much of your time and indeed delivering that keynote address. For those watching, as I've explained earlier, through powers that be, I recognise that you have been pulled away to another.
I can run after this. I could probably take one more question, and then I'll hand over to the brilliant Gillian, who will. You're actually, I can tell you want to get to Gillian more than me. You see, so, but I've probably got time for one more if there is another one.
Well, certainly, if I could potentially hand over to our Commissioner, who is involved in our first report, the Vice Chancellor of Birkbeck College, which obviously covers sort of part-time flexible learning, Professor David Latchman, to ask his question. This will be the final question, but thank you very much for your time.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much, Secretary, for taking my question. It's absolutely fantastic after many years in Birkbeck to actually have a government which is committed to lifelong learning and committed to all these issues. So I think that's a fantastic thing, and we really, really welcome it and want to be part of it. I think my question is, if this is so important, as we all agree it is, I understand the difficulties, but why are we waiting till 2025 before we really introduce this? I know you said you do pilots for short courses, but there is an urgent need now. You know better than I do because of Brexit and the pandemic. Why not introduce loan funding for short courses for the fees now, so that people could actually do it now?
So David, thank you ever so much for the kind words about the sort of intent and direction of where we're going. And this is genuinely such a personal passion of mine, because I always think when I was back at school and then when I went to college after school, but the number of friends of mine who, didn't always have the best choices in life, and actually how if we can make these changes, actually, many of my friends who I was at college with would have actually a better set of choices at 18 than maybe they were actually faced with then. I understand your impatience. I mean, some of the challenges is we actually have to create the legal framework for this, which is obviously why we are pushing ahead with the bill. And I'm so pleased that actually it's one of the first bills out of the stocks. But we do actually, I'm sounding very civil servanty here, but I mean, we do have to create that framework. We do have to consult, but we do actually have to make sure that the structures work, and we do have to trial. But I am impatient for it, like you. If I could bring it forward, I have to say I'm sort of straining at the leash, but I've got to get my legislation through. I've got to get my consultations through. We've got to just make sure it works. But I promise you, if there's ever any way of making it happen quicker, I'm absolutely pulling in the exact same direction as yourself.
Well, thank you. And I apologise you can't see me. We do have one or two ideas which we've discussed with Alison Wolfe where you could do this earlier in certain areas. So perhaps we could discuss that at some point with you or your team.
Of course, delighted to. And as you'll probably know, if you've been speaking to Alison, she's almost as enthusiastic as I am in order to be able to make that happen at the earliest possible moment. So, but be delighted to do so. I do apologise. I've got very twitchy officials that are waving at me on the other side of this camera, Chris. So I'm going to have to beat a retreat. But Chris, can I just ask thank you personally, because I know that actually there's few other ministers who sort of done so much in terms of championing this whole sector in terms of, post-18 education. There's been few other ministers that have actually spoken more passionately about the need for science and technology to be absolutely at the forefront. And actually, as we've exited the European Union, how best that we're able to sort of mobilise, our worldwide competitive advantage in these areas to actually make sure it really works for the country in the most effective way. So thank you for what you have been doing, but also thank you for the role that you'll play in actually building on this. And Philip, it would be remiss of me not to say thank you ever so much for giving me a platform and sort of being able to say a few words on this. And I'll hand over to Gillian, but thank you so much. Take care.
Secretary of State, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.
Cheers. Bye now.
Well, for the audience watching, I'm incredibly delighted and grateful to introduce the Skills Minister, Gillian Keegan, who, as many of you will know, has sort of direct experience as starting off as an apprentice, and recognising the benefits of lifelong learning. And now she's been able to put that into practice, sort of driving forward the reforms that will take place in the Skills Bill. And it's fantastic to have two for the price of one, Gillian. Hope you don't mind me saying that, because you will be the minister who will be mostly taking forward some of the legislation on the floor of the House and really getting into the details at committee stage. Welcome, I'm sure that is. So you will end up sort of knowing this legislation, the legal text off by heart. Thank you so much for stepping in to answer a couple of questions from the commissioners who've put forward some questions. If it's all right with you, I'm going to hand over to Professor Helen Marshall, the Vice Chancellor of Salford University, to ask her question.
Thank you, Chris, very much. And we actually met in Manchester a couple of years ago, Gillian. I don't know whether you remember.
I did, but at dinner.
Yes, that's right. So the University of Salford has been doing a huge amount in the degree apprenticeship space, as you're aware. And during those conversations with employers, the big ask from the employers was around what the Prime Minister has described as the missing middle, particularly level 4 and level 5 courses. And at Salford, we've been working really hard for the last 18 months to develop a portfolio of level 4, level 5 courses that plugs the skills gap around Greater Manchester and the Northwest, but is also very focused on levelling up and going into communities that enable those students to get into those HND type programs. We're trying to do this through an Institute of Technology. We're through to the second phase, and we're hoping that we're successful in that. But nevertheless, we are putting our first tranche of programs on the ground in September 21 because the employer ask is just getting louder and louder. We've got fantastic FE partners, and we've got fantastic employers who are working with us, and we are very focused on being demand-led. So it's the employers that help us design the curriculum, not us. It's demand, not supply side driven. But one of the things that is slowing us down, and I think this is something government may have an answer to or may want to go and have a look at, one of the things that's slowing us down is the often conflicting and competing regulatory and funding regimes between FE and HE. And the way in which we're trying to push things forward, FE said, "Oh, not sure we can do it like that. We haven't, we don't do that. And we're saying, well, hang on, we can't work like that with you." And I'm just wondering whether, if this missing middle is going to be successful, government could take away or have a look at how we put in place a single framework for everybody to play in. And that would speed things up, I think, quite considerably.
Yeah, thanks, Helen, and thanks for your question. And also, you know, obviously your IoT bid, obviously you're now working on the proposal, and we look forward to receiving all the proposals on the 16th of June. And it is an exciting development, I think, as a way to, you know, to really get that collaboration between universities and provide the platform, that the space to create those collaborations with employers, etc., and universities and a number of colleges. And we are delighted with the progress that we're making there. Of course, you know, it's really keen, and as you say, you know, employer-led, to have that employer leadership, because having worked for 30 years in different industry sectors all over the world before becoming a member of parliament, because I was quite often working in tech, it was always, we were always massively short of skills, and these are global skills challenges. Most of the skills challenges we have, they are actually in every country around the world, which is really why it's so important, and the timing really is now to get this right. So, you know, obviously we've committed to simplifying and reforming the FE funding system. In the Skills for Jobs white paper, it is a very different funding system. They have been developed completely separate, and of course we do need to really refocus our accountability system and really simplify the funding system, and you know, better reflect how providers will meet the local skills needs. So that's really a big part of the focus, and of course alongside the Skills for Job white paper, we also did publish the interim conclusion of the Dr. Phillip Blond report as well, where we sort of committed to consulting further on reforms to the student finance system and having a sustainable student finance system as well. So I think we've got all the pieces in place, and we recognise that we need to do that, and we need to really make it simpler but more accountable, and more accountable in terms of, you know, Philip mentioned in his introduction as well as Chris about the skills challenges we face, which I know are global, and also the productivity challenges we face. When you think of all the big things we have to do as a country, not only building back and recovering from the pandemic, but some of the net zero and really challenging targets we've got, then it's absolutely vital that we get this all working. So we will be, you know, working on it further. There will be further consultations and a lot of opportunity to engage. So I think we recognise the problem, but again, with all of these things, we need to make sure we get the right solutions and high quality, and actually really closing those skills gaps. Those global skills gaps is going to be the key accountability that we need to step forward and make sure that we do, which I know that you're doing a lot of work on already, many of you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. We have 4 more questions from Commission members before I'll sort of pick out a couple of questions that come through in the Q&A. Can I now turn to Simone Buitendijk, the newly appointed Vice Chancellor of University of Leeds. And Simone, can you turn your video on, and for all Commission members when they ask a question so we can see, it would be fantastic.
I'm not quite sure how to turn my video on. I was able to unmute myself, but I don't see the video actually. So I think it may be disabled.
It may be a security.
Oh.
So just press on. Thank you, Simone.
Can you see me now? Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I was going to ask what the Minister can do to help us actually implement this plan as research-intensive universities, but there's so much already been in the speech. I think it's very important that the University of Leeds, as you know, Russell Group University, we feel just as responsible to create this education ecosystem as every other university should. So we really need to partner with FE colleges and think about upskilling, working with employers. And we're very keen to do that. I think the biggest thing that probably may be in our way, and I would really love some insight from the Minister on this, is the regulatory framework. Because I think it would be best if we could actually blend our different student bodies, and we could use modular learning also for the more regular students, the 18 to 22-year-olds. If we can bring in business and industry leaders also for our on-campus students. So if there's a seamless, if there's actually no difference between the students that we'll be attracting in this new scheme and the students that are more traditional, if you wish. But I can already see some of the problems with the regulatory framework, which is still very much molded on this old 3-year, 4-year straight track, as the minister was just saying, kind of degree. So I think it would be absolutely brilliant if there are ways to make sure that also the research intensive universities can play their pivotal role in this. And if the different types of students would be almost indistinguishable from each other, because I actually think our young people who go for more traditional university degrees can greatly benefit from this different way of thinking about their careers, and can greatly benefit from exposure to industry while they're in universities. And we also need to bring different people into our universities who normally may not feel like they're for them. But I fear the present regulatory framework may be in the way of it. So we want to be actually absolutely leading in leads, and everything the minister says is music to my ears. But working on the regulations and the oversight, I think is going to be absolutely pivotal. So I'd love to hear some thoughts on that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I mean, I don't underestimate the size of the opportunity, but also the size of the change and the challenge that we have to go.
Yeah.
And there's a huge cultural shift, not only the cultural shift of individuals, and they're giving themselves permission to re-engage back with the education system and having an easy way to do that, but also the culture shift of employers. You know, I've worked with some employers over many years who have worked specifically with universities, and you know, either taken interns or sandwich degrees, or we've done you know, various degree apprenticeships and those kind of things, but not many do, and not many do engage with the system. So there's a culture shift there as well. Yeah. And obviously, to get a very strong employer-led system, we need leadership from employers, and that's something which is, you know, again, something which is a culture shift that we have to support as well. And then, of course, you've got some of the things that are blockers, the as is, you know, the way people do things today, the way people defend what they do today, the way
exactly
don't collaborate, because people generally tend to feel a bit more threatened by collaboration, etc. So it isn't, I don't underestimate this. And by the way, anytime anyone looks at this, they always look at it and think, well, I already do this. It's the first thing they think. The second,
yeah, that's not what I think. I think we need a big
the second thing they think is, you know, there's somebody else who's not got the good behaviors. I've got all the good behaviors, and my change is minimal. And then, you know, what have I got to lose? And I think really what we've got to be focused on, and we have lost focus on this, and it shocked me. I you know, I haven't been involved in education, you know, from this side of the table, so since I went to school myself, and you know, did a degree apprenticeship 30 odd years ago, and all the same things. The reason I did a degree apprenticeship from a nosy comprehensive school in 1984 was because there were massive skill shortages, there were leadership and management challenges, because they couldn't find the people, because they had to go further back in the supply chain, they had to create their own, because the people coming out of university didn't have the skills that the businesses wanted even then. So that was a driver then, and I think it's even more of a driver now. Yeah. And when I think of the technological shift that has happened, particularly since 2000, since the internet really became ubiquitous, and what the platform that's done to shift many things and shift many capabilities, we really do have to really think of this as a step change in our ambition. But and when you get that, it's attitude that defines whether you're going to be successful or not, whether people want to be successful, whether they want to make it successful, whether they believe that working very closely together and collaborated will make that. The secondary things will be things like regulatory change and making those regulatory change. Obviously, some of it will happen in the skills bill. Obviously, some things we'll be consulting on, and then there'll be other things that we would, you know, consider as a result of that consultation. But actually, that if you have the real drive and desire, that will become a secondary issue, is my belief.
Thank you,
Minister. I think so too, but I still think working together will be absolutely pivotal.
Thank you very much. So I've got a list of questions. We've got 15 minutes left, so I'm going to have to move to the next question, which is from a commission member who's unfortunately had to sort of leave the discussion, Elizabeth Wenzerall. who's head of external partnerships and relationships at the Association of Colleges. But she said she's going to watch this back, so wanted a question to be asked, which is, do you agree that a significant barrier to lifelong education is a lack of financial support? And how do you intend to approach cross-departmental issues like benefits entitlement to ensure that everyone has a fair opportunity to learn new skills without being penalised? Minister.
I did notice that most of these questions were about money, but maybe that's just a theme that I noticed. I mean, obviously, financial support can be a barrier. Financial support's a barrier to everything. In fact, half the reason we're doing this as well is to make sure that people can optimize their earnings, can use the talent that they have to get better jobs. And there's nothing more heartbreaking than seeing massive skills gaps at the same time as growing unemployment, which is what we're seeing at the moment, not just in our country. Actually, many OECD countries are following, having the same challenges, which are understandable. So yes, of course it can, and we are really, we've got some existing policies, but we are trying to, through the introduction of new measures, try and sort of reduce this obstacle to some degree. Obviously, we've got various different things. We've got the adult education budget, and it is complex as we do it today. And we've also got learner support, and we've got different bursaries, etc. But one of the things that we've done, which I think is a great step, is from the 1st of April, as part of the lifetime skills guarantees, is to basically say, any one of these 400 fully funded level 3 courses, there's long-term commitment. We've backed that with £95 million. That'll be interesting to see. It looks like it's going very well. We've had some very early data. Obviously, we only started the courses in April, but it looks like there's some really interesting, real interest in this. So maybe the timing, we've got that right. And obviously, we're also complementing that with skills boot camps. And skills boot camps is another way to access. It's free, and it's another way to access in a more meaningful way, perhaps with a shorter focus, etc. But the other thing we've been doing is working with the DWP to try and see if we can give those people who are on benefits that a little bit longer to be able to take some of the lifelong, the level 3 learning entitlement, particularly the shorter courses, which tend to be quite popular with adults, but also the boot camps. So working out that we will have up to 16 weeks that you can you can do a boot camp whilst also obviously the length of time that you can also claim universal credit. So that's a pilot that we're going to do, and they're going to work out, see what that does. But we are aware of this. But the real incentive, and this is something, I mean, I've known for my whole life, but I think it's something that I think many people now are aware of, which is the real incentive for adults to retrain is if they'll get a much better job. If you can see a clear line of sight to a better job with more pay, you will do it, and you will retrain if the options there is available, you think it's accessible, and you know what you'll get for it. And our system is so difficult to navigate. And certainly if you're trying to say, if I do this, I'll get a really great job and this is what it's going to pay me, it's really difficult to navigate, and we really have to make it much simpler, because that's what's going to provide a much bigger cohort of adults who have confidence to re-engage in education, to give them the confidence to re-engage and the drive. Thank you.
Another question from a commission member, which won't be about money, I think, is from Professor René Kogelbauer, the Dean of Lifelong Learning and Professional Practice at Newcastle University. René. René on the, René there. Yes.
Hello. Thank you, Minister, for taking my question. As Helen and Simone have already kind of stated, many universities and colleges have been forming partnerships, and here at Newcastle University we've done exactly the same, both with our universities and colleges, as you will know from your recent visit up here as well. And these partnerships were formed with a particular focus on addressing the skills shortages that have been highlighted by government as well as employers, and the proposed local skills improvement that you've identified in terms of the improvement plans are therefore a welcomed feature. And my question is, to what extent are you envisaging that the colleges and universities to collaborate and develop a creative and flexible approach to credit transfer models? And if so, would you envisage a national standardization of these processes, or is it allowed to be very kind of localized and really play to that kind of place strengths of kind of regional improvement plans as you've identified in some of your documentation?
Yeah, thanks, Renee. Well, I think the current lack of a sort of systematic and widely used practice for building up credit across different institutions and transferring that is definitely a key barrier for flexible lifelong learning. And we do want to enable greater flexibility for learners as well, to be able to accumulate, transfer credit, between institutions, etc. And over time to build up over time. But of course, they have to be meaningful qualifications. And this, modularizing things isn't easy either. And there's a number of people, when you mention things that have been tried in the past, they kind of go slightly pale because it really has to be meaningful qualifications. So it's very important that we really do focus on making sure we get that right. But we will take action to incentivize easier and more frequent credit transfer between institutions, and we will work towards a well-integrated, aligned higher and further education provision with the flexibility that will give the students, the chance to move between settings to suit their needs. And that is the overall goal. But again, the emphasis is making sure that we have a very high quality, and the currency, the transferability is also well understood by employers as well.
Thank you, Minister. I'm going to turn now to Dr. Annabel Kiernan, another Commission member who is Pro-Vice Chancellor for Education at Staffordshire University, that's really focused on lifelong learning. Annabel, can I hand over to you?
I apologise. Good afternoon. I'm afraid it is slightly a question around funding again, Minister, if that's okay. But at Staffordshire University, we've been reimagining our offer in terms of supporting regional regeneration through micro-credentials. So that's obviously reskilling, upskilling the local community, and to support having those flexible entry points into higher learning. And it really is a core part of our mission as a civic university. But the current funding model probably doesn't quite meet our ambition just yet. So I suppose it's whether you've got any thoughts or could elaborate on how you think that the funding model might evolve to support that kind of stepping on and stepping off to suit those individual circumstances through the lifelong learning, life-wide learning approach.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we are, it sounds like you're a bit ahead of the journey, and that obviously, as the Secretary of State said, we think it's going to take a bit of time to get this right, and I know everybody will have some ideas of how potentially it could be done earlier, but it's very, very important to get this right, and there's a lot of work that we do have to do, not least the regulatory staff, but then the design of what is a module, making sure that it really, really is the high quality, that it's got transferability, it's got currency that's worthwhile, and we do need to make sure that we make sure that the learners, they put their faith in a system that delivers for them. And that isn't always the case. So we do need to make sure in this it definitely does. So obviously we're introducing something from 2025. I think really, the consultation is the most important thing. As you've got some of that experience, it'd be really good for you to obviously respond to that and put your experience of what you've already discovered. And of course, trialing it as well. I think trialing it's going to be really, really important. We will be doing that from 2022, 23, so that sort of year. And we will be trialing loan access to support tuition fees for certain shorter courses, which is in a way an easier place to start and might have been part of what people were thinking earlier. Well, that will help us build and test towards the lifelong learning entitlement. But I think that's going to be quite a valuable and vital test and stage here, because there's ways that you could easily modularize and ruin what we've got and worsen the quality. So we need to make sure that we have exactly the opposite impact here. And that's really why we need to take time to make sure we get it right.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you so much for your time today. I can attest to the fact you didn't even know you'll be taking this Q&A session at 2 o'clock this afternoon. So really do appreciate you stepping in and to be able to sort of answer some of the questions from the Commission members. It's always the regret of a chair that when we run nearly out of time, unable to take some of the questions that have been asked, particularly in this digital age. I see there's some fantastic points that have been raised in the Q&A box below, particularly from Mark Packham and Johnny Rich, the chair of the Engineering Professors Council, and we'll definitely be dwelling on some of those questions and points that have been raised as part of the Commission's work. But unfortunately, we're out of time to be able to ask the Minister any more questions. So I'm going to hand back over now to Phillip Blond from ResPublica to talk about the work of the Commission. If anyone's interested in joining the Commission, how they can do so and how to get in further involved. Phillip, back over to you. But Minister, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Minister, and thanks again, Chris. It's been a fabulous session. I'd really like to thank the department for engaging, and Gillian, if I may say so, a really lucid set of answers that we look forward to engaging with. One of the key points that we want to do in the Commission is address the whole system. So we were thrilled that Doncaster Metropolitan Borough Council has joined the Commission, become a member of the Commission, to look at how skills can turn around a whole place. And they've got a wonderful approach to changing culture in the whole of Doncaster to essentially create this lifelong learning culture that I think will play exactly into the issues and agendas that Gillian identifies. We're interested in members joining from the entire skills ecosystem, if you will, and it's great that we've got some of the smallest specialist institutions from Guild HE joining us. We've obviously got the Association of Colleges joining, and today, Chris, Leicester College joined us, so we're up to 15 members already. If you'd like to join, my email has just been posted on the side. You would join as an institutional member, which would be to facilitate the overall engagement. We hope to have dinners in Parliament. We'd love to invite you to a dinner, Gillian, to speak more to members. We want to create fraternity and friendship between universities, HE, private training providers, business schools. You know, it's vital if we're going to address the lack of diffusion of training in our business sectors that they step up to the plate. Otherwise, you know, we're going to miss them. And we would encourage other local authorities to join us. And as an institutional member, you will have the opportunity to fund the reports and the research that we're doing. We've got 3 reports already commissioned. The first with Birkbeck, the second looks like focusing on institutes of technology and in the north, and those level 4 or 5, the intermediate skills that the Secretary of State talked about, that Salford are going to lead on, which is wonderful. And we hope indeed to announce a report on how skills can level up an entire area with a report backed by Doncaster Metropolitan Borough Council. So with your concerns, whatever they might be, and I've been speaking with many of you, might be cohorts, it might be language learning, might be business training, might be continued professional development, join the Commission. We will link you with other members and we will create a voice, I think, that is loud enough to change the entire system. All of you have spoken to me about micro-credentials, the importance of skills as well as qualifications. And as Chris noted, all the very good questions that you've listed there, you know, including, for instance, from the food and drink sector, you know, why aren't we included given our vital role in the economy? These are all issues we want to address. So join us, work with Chris, work with the government, and I think we have the opportunity to push the skills agenda as the decisive agenda for levelling up. Academics concur, it's skills. They are amongst a group of salient factors, in my view, the most important for levelling up and distributing opportunity across the country. So thank you all, and I hope to speak to you again soon. Thank you.